Hello, dear students. Today we will have a lecture on theoretical grammar. The topic of our lecture is the verb. The layout of the lecture consists of several points, which today we will discuss about general characteristics of the verb as a part of speech, the classification of the verb, the category of voice, the category of tense, and the category of aspect. The verb is the most complex part of speech, and it performs the central role in realizing predication, connection between situation in the utterance and reality. That's why the verb is of primary informative significance in an utterance. The verb possesses quite a lot of grammatical categories. Furthermore, within the class of the verb, various subclass division based on different principles of classification can be found. Semantic, morphological, syntactic features. Semantic feature of the verb possesses the grammatical meaning of verbality, the ability to denote a process developing in time. This meaning is inherent not only in the verbs denoting processes, but also in those denoting states, which is situation, forms of existence, evaluation, and etc. The morphological features of the verb, it's quite this question we do not find a generally accepted viewpoint. Boris Eilish identifies 6 grammatical categories in present-day English verb. They are tense, aspect, mood, voice, person, and number. While Barkhudarov distinguishes only the following grammatical categories: voice, order, aspect, and mood. Further, he notes that the finite forms of the verb have special means expressing person, number, and tense. So he distinguished 4 categories of the verbs. Khaimovich and Rogovskaya, out of the 8 grammatical categories of the verb, some are found not only in the finites, but in the verbids as well. 2 of them, voice, order, are found in all the verbids, and the third, aspect, only in the infinitive. So we distinguish 6 categories of grammatical categories of the verb. They are tense, voice, person, aspect, mood, number. The grammatical categories of the verb find their expression in synthetical and analytical form. The formative elements expressing these categories are grammatical affixes, inner inflection, function words. Some categories have only synthetical forms, and they are person and number. Others only analytical, that would be voice. And there are also categories expressed by both synthetical and analytical form. They are mood, tense, and aspect. Syntactic features, it is the most universal feature of the verbs, is their ability to be modified by adverbs. Secondly, the important syntactic criterion is the ability of the verb to perform the syntactic function of the predicate. However, the criterion is not absolute because only finite forms can perform this function, while non-finite forms can be used in any function but predicate. Finally, any verb in the form of the infinitive can be combined with modal verb. According to different principles of classification, classification can be morphological, lexical morphological, syntactical, and functional. Morphological classification, according to their stem types, all verbs fall into simple, to go, to sleep, to speak, to read, to write, or sound replacive, food, to feed, blood, to bleed, and stress replacive, import, to import, transport, to transport, expanded with the help of suffixes and prefixes, cultivate, justify, and the next is overcome, composite, correspond to composite nouns, to blackmail, and the last is phrasal, which we have, for example, to have a smoke, to give a smile. They always have an ordinary verb as an equivalent. According to the way of forming past tense and participle to verbs can be regular and irregular. The regular, usually they form due to the productive suffixes. This is the adding to the verb ed, and irregular, this is non-productive, means root vowel change, suppletion, and unchanged forms. Lexical morphological classification is based on implicit grammatical meaning of the verb. According to the implicit grammatical meaning of transitivity and intransitivity, verbs fall into ability of taking objects. And they subdivided into two, transitive and intransitive. Verbs combined with direct object or prepositional one called transitive, and verbs expressing emotions, state motion, position in space, intransitive. According to the implicit grammatical meaning of stativeness, non-stativeness verbs fall into stative and dynamic. According to the implicit grammatical meaning of terminatives and non-terminatives, verbs fall into terminative and durative. This classification is closely connected with the categories of aspect and phase. Syntactic classification, they will be a finite and non-finite. Basically, according to the nature predication, primary and secondary, all verbs fall into finite and non-finite. Finite verbs are the act as the main verb and can be changed according to the noun, while non-finite verb cannot be the main verb as they do not talk about the action that is being performed by the subject or noun. Finite verb use only in present and past tense, while non-finite verb do not indicate any tense, mood, or gender. Finite verb can be indicative of passive or active voice and also of number, singular and plural, while non-finite verb used as nouns, adverbs, and adjectives, as well as non-finite used to form non-finite clauses, which are simply dependent clauses that use non-finite verbs. So let us look at the samples in order more to understand the difference between finite and non-finite verbs. The sample which I brought it here as she walks home. Here we see that the finite verb is walks and the pronoun is she. And the second sample, she walked home. Here we can see how the verb changed, modified to change the tense of the sentence in the past. She walked. While the first sentence in present. So you see, according to the tense change. So that is basically about the finite verb. And non-finite verb, usually there are three types: gerunds, infinitives, and participles. Participle 1 and 2. Let us see at the samples. As a gerund, I like swimming. And as an infinitive, I decided not to go to New York. So here, the infinitive is not to go. And participle, it's I have seen broken vase. Or crying girl is my niece. Functional classification of verbs. According to the function, the verb divided into three. So basically, it is two, the notional and functional, but functional subdivides into three: link verbs, modal verbs, and auxiliary verbs. So what does notional means? Notional verb is a full lexical meaning which have of their own. So they do not need any link verbs or modal verb or auxiliary verb, while functional need link verbs and modal verbs, and auxiliaries need the auxiliary verbs. So what does link verbs mean, and what is the difference between link verbs and auxiliary verbs? Links verbs are used as a finite forms of the verb. They are part of compound nominal predicates and express voice, tense, and other categories. And modal verbs express mood and tense since they function as a part of predicates, but not predicative. And besides, in present day English, there is another group of verbs which are called auxiliaries or helping verbs, and they are used to form analytical form of verbs. So full lexical, the category of voice. By the category of voice, we mean different grammatical ways of expressing the relation between the transitive verb and its subject and object. The majority of authors of English theoretical grammar seem to recognize only two voices in English, and they are active and passive. The form of the verb may show whether the agent expressed by the subject is the doer of the action or the recipient of the action. For example, John broke the vase. And in a passive, the vase was broken by John. The objective relations between the action and the subject or object of action find their expression in language as grammatical category of voice. Therefore, the category of voice reflects the objective relations between the action itself and the subject or object of the action. So you see here in the chart relations of actions and the category of voice. The category of voice is realized through the opposition. So if there is an active, the opposition will be the passive voice. The realization of the voice category is restricted because of the implicit grammatical meaning of transitivity and intransitivity. In accordance with the meaning, all English verbs should fall into transitive and intransitive. So let us look, what does intransitive verbs mean and transitive? A verb can be described, as we said, as transitive or intransitive based on whether it requires an object to express a complete thought or not. Intransitive verbs used in a causative sense are called transitive verbs. An intransitive verb will make sense without one. So, in conclusion, intransitive verbs do not need any object. So let us look now in the chart of transitive verbs. A transitive verb is a verb that accepts one or more objects. And this contrasts with intransitive verbs, which do not have objects. Transitive verbs can be classified by the number of objects they require. So it means the transitive verb requires an object in the form of noun, pronoun to complete its meaning. And transitive verbs are used with the direct object. However, the classifications turns out to be more complex and comprises 6 groups. The first, verbs used only transitively, for example, to mock, to race. And the second, verbs with the main transitive meaning, like to see, to make, to build. And the third, verbs of intransitive meaning and secondary transitive meaning. A lot of intransitive verbs may develop a secondary transitive meaning. Let us look at an example. They laughed me into agreement. Or he danced the girl out of the room. So the fourth, verbs of a double nature. Neither of meanings are the leading one. The verbs can be used both transitively and intransitively. For example, to drive home, to drive a car. Verbs that are never used in the passive voice. That would be the fifth rule. So for example, to seem and become. They never use in the passive voice. The sixth, verbs that realize their passive meaning only in special context. For example, to leave, to sleep, to sit, to walk, to jump, and all is in a life. The category of tense is a verbal category that reflects the objective category of time. And the essential characteristics of the category of tense is that it relates the theme of action, event, or state of affairs. Referred to in the sentences to the time of the utterance being now or the present moment. The tense category is realized through the oppositions. The binary principal oppositions remains the basic one in the correlation of the forms that represent the grammatical category of tense. The present moment is the main temporal plane, the verbal action. So generally speaking, the major tense distinction in English is undoubtedly that which is traditionally described as an opposition of past, present. But this is the best regarded as a contrast of past and non-past. Quite a lot of scholars do not recognize the existence of future tenses because what is described as the future tense in English is realized by means of auxiliary verbs, which we will use will, shall, or in the past, would, should. Or also, it is undeniable that will and shall occur in many sentences that refer to the future. They also occur in sentences that do not, and they do not necessarily occur in sentences with the future time reference. So that's why future tenses are often treated as a partly modal. So the category of aspect is a linguistic representation of the objective category of manner of action, and it is realized through the opposition. Like if it is continuous, then the opposition will be non-continuous, or we can say in other way around, progressive and non-progressive. The realization of the category of aspect is closely connected with the lexical meaning of verbs. There are some verbs in English that do not normally occur with the progressive aspect, even in those contexts in which the majority of verbs necessarily take the progressive form. Amongst the so-called non-progressive verbs are the verb think, understand, know, hate, love, see, taste, feel, and etc. The most striking characteristic that they have in common is the fact that they are stative. They refer to a state of affairs rather than to an action, event, or process. It should be observed, however, that all the non-progressive verbs take progressive aspect under particular circumstances. As a result of internal transposition verbs of non-progressive nature can be found in the continuous form. For example, now I'm knowing you. Generally speaking, the continuous forms has at least two semantic features: duration, which means the action is always in progress, and the definiteness that express the action is always limited to definite point of period of time. In other words, the purpose of the continuous form is to serve as a frame which makes the process of the action more concrete and isolated. That is the end of our lecture. I'm not saying you goodbye still, because I have some other home tasks for you which I prepared. And the home task I prepared for you 16 of questions. Those are study questions, which you have to look at those questions and try to find the answer. So what you understand out of this lecture, and how you understand, how you can categorize the verb, how you can classify the verb, and how you can give the general characteristics and what type of verbs you know, and why do some scientists say that verbs are system of systems, and what you understand for finite and non-finite verbs, and etc. That will make you more deeply to understand the lecture, the verb. And for sure, I also recommended, I made a list of recommended literature and as well as some websites. And I definitely will send you the PPT in a PDF format, that those who cannot run the video lesson, so you can look at the PDF format where you can find the websites as well as the name of the books by the name of authors. And I prepared for you shortly also the chart in order for you more quick to revise the topic, like about the formation of the verbs, so they can be regular and irregular, and as per the ability of taking objects, they can be transitive and intransitive, and of course the features of the verb, how they can get the prefix and they form the verb, and with the suffix, how they can form the verb, and the basic forms of the verb, types of verb formation, and etc. So now there is a time to say goodbye till the next lecture. Thank you very much for your attention, and that was appreciated that you spent your time while watching the online lecture. Goodbye.